the 200th episode of Productivity Mastery. Very excited to be here to dive into productivity, leadership, performance. And you might be wondering where Stoyan is, the host of Productivity Mastery. Well, today, exceptionally, to celebrate the 200th episode, I will be interviewing Stoyan. My name is Katie Stoddart. I'm the founder of the Focus Bee, also a high performance coach and speaker. So excited to be here. Stoyan, so great to have you here for your 200th episode.
Thank you so much, Katie. I couldn't imagine anybody else to be here with me. This is how the podcast actually started. We recorded episode number one together. And prior to episode number one, we've done a number of collaborations, including co hosting workshops, co hosting live sessions, podcast sessions. So I'm excited to be on the guest seat today.
It's such a long time ago, it feels, when you first interviewed me, and now we're reversing a seat where I get to have the privilege to interview you. But maybe a best place to start is what inspired you to start Productivity Mastery to begin with?
To be honest, it was coronavirus. Uh, so, full gratitude to coronavirus for the opportunity to start a podcast in 2020. I was an extrovert locked at home with all speaking and consulting gigs postponed or canceled. So, what could I do? What should I do? That was the question that I would say many people were asking themselves. In my case, it was, wait a second, I know so many amazing people, exceptional people like yourself, which I happen to meet due to my career as a speaker. I travel a lot. I meet a lot of great people at conferences. I'm a networking type, so I get to meet even more interesting people. And I used to have so many exceptional conversations, lunches, dinners with people that I was thinking of, oh my God, I wish I recorded those conversations because I wanna listen to it again. And that was part of the inspiration and motivation. And I have to give credit to Anya Bolton, the person that inspired me. That was my right hand for a few years. Inspired me to start this podcast, and I guess it was just an experiment to begin with. I just called you or wrote you. I don't remember. Hey, Katie, I want to try this thing. Let's jump on a call and let's record it. And I think it was Zoom initially. I think we did a
I
Zoom.
think it was. I think it
Yeah,
was. It was so long ago. I think it was April 2020. And how has the journey been? So that was 4 years ago, more than 4 years ago. How has that journey been? Were there times you wanted to give up? Is it hard to have a podcast? How has it been for you the last 4.5 years?
I think a lot of people don't understand how much work it takes to run a podcast properly. You're a podcaster yourself. You know that it's not just showing up and talking to the person. There's a lot of work, especially when you have a podcast that you have to secure high profile guests. I mean, you know that it's mm, some of the guests I've been chasing them, or somebody from the team been chasing them for 2 or 3 years. Um, Guy Kawasaki, for example, was our one of our guests. I think the first time I approached him was 3 years ago, and we finally got the chance to secure him as a guest on the podcast this summer. Where was there any time to I wanted to quit the podcast? Not really. There were some moments and times that I was so overwhelmingly busy that I had to put it on hold for a few weeks, consciously and intentionally. I never has it even been a thought, should I quit the podcast? And the reason is, this is my hour of the week. You know, as much as I do this podcast for the audience, and we have incredible feedback, we have high profile guests, it's incredible, but I also do it for myself. This 60 minutes every week that I have an opportunity to learn from some of the brightest minds on the planet, to ask them any questions I want, to engage with them, to create relationships with them. So I'm probably the biggest fan of the podcast. I mean, I've listened to the episodes a few times over. And it's not that because I love myself, I just want to listen to my, like, it's because of the guests and because of the knowledge and insights I'm getting from them. So it's never been a time I wanted to stop. I'm excited to for this to be just the beginning. Episode 200 is the beginning, but hopefully, we're gonna go to 500, 2,000, 10,000. I don't know. It might evolve, but I'm very excited to to be part of this journey and to have my team to be excited about it too. And I just want to to ask everyone to invite everybody who's listening live. By the way, if you guys are here with us on LinkedIn, let us know what country are you joining us from. Drop a comment. We're gonna engage with you, and if you have any stories, any insights, if there was an episode that really resonated with you, just let us know in the comments. We want to celebrate with you guys, and we're very grateful for having you as listeners supporting the show.
Yeah, so much of what you shared, Stoyan, about your journey with the podcast resonates because having my own podcast, I agree that I think it's the best university to learn from all these amazing guests and the depth of the conversations. I mean, it's really amazing. And I'm like you, I never really thought about quitting. I think it's just such an amazing journey to be on. And so I'm curious to know, how do you prepare for your interviews? You mentioned the logistics was quite challenging. How do you prepare for these interviews?
Let me just give a credit to Nicoletta is joining us from Romania. We have Anna here with us. Thank you for this incredible achievement. I'm truly grateful for the opportunity to follow your journey and support you along the way. Anna, you are such a giver. I'm just so grateful to know people like you. Thank you so much, Nicoletta, for being with us and actually being the podcast manager. Many people don't realize, but Nico is the one that's running the podcast, arranging everything, managing me, which is not always an easy task. So thank you so much, Nicoletta. Now back to your question. Uh, what do I do to prepare for a podcast? So we do have a process. We have a bunch of processes, but for me as a host, as this is my role being mainly the host, it starts with the strategy, the vision for the podcast. What are the kind of topics we want to cover so we can create most value for the audience? What are the topics people are interested in? Who are the people we want to get on board? So partly I'm part of the securing the guests team together with Nicoletta, who's doing an exceptional job reaching out and securing some of these high profile guests. So once we have a guest secured, let's say we book the recording and we consciously decided that we want this podcast to be live. So we're recording live. There are some pros and there are some cons. When you're recording live, anything can happen. We had the former chief creative officer of ClickUp join us on the show, and her cat broke a glass bowl during the episode. So she was just in the middle of saying stuff, and then the cat just went and so there's some stories, right? Like sometimes, not many times, but the Wi-Fi doesn't work, the guest, or something happens, right? So, but that was a conscious decision. So I need to be really sharp and prepare for the episodes. So I do a lot of research of the guests, and I usually create a bit of a structure of how do I want the conversation to be. So I mean, I'm not so much of a reader. I'm more of a listener. So, fortunately, most of our guests are visiting other podcasts or they're speaking at events. So I listen to many podcasts that they do. If they are authors, and probably at least one third, maybe one half of the guests have published a book, just like yourself, Katie. And then I listen to the books. If there is not no audiobook version, I usually download the Kindle and I read the book, but I like to listen to it because it's faster. And while I do, I'm taking notes and I'm trying to make a script. I know that the episode is going to be around 60 minutes. So it's more about, there's a few objectives I have with the podcast. How do I, number one is the audience. How do I get the most insights, values, strategies, ideas, the best pack for the audience? That's number one. But in order to do that, I need to be prepared and structured. At the same time, I need to let the spontaneity to happen. because I don't know what I don't know, right? Like I might ask Kai Kawasaki a question and then he shares this story and then I want to go deeper. So while I have a plan, I'm also very much open to to lead the conversation in some other direction. So that's kind of part of my preparation process is getting to know the person, sending them the sample questions if they want. Actually, some guests are like, "Don't send me anything. I just want to be super spontaneous. Let's have a conversation." Um, we have some guests that are credible guests. They're amazing in what they do. They're very inspiring, but they're not necessarily great communicators, or they're a little bit afraid when you have to interview them live. They're like, "Oh my god, it's live." So part of my role is to ensure that we they're a little bit more calm and and when we start recording, they have the feeling that they just have a conversation with we have like a cup of coffee and we just chat about it. Now I've done some depending on the guest again, Katie. Sometimes I've done I'll ask the guest to close their eyes before we start, and I'll do a little guided visualization so I can put them into a given frequency in which they are not kind of nervous. Uh, and just like preparing for a speech, for me, preparing a podcast is it's really important. How do I begin? What is the opening question, and where do I want them to start with? And then how do I close and wrap up the episode? Which often is prepared a little bit. I kind of know what I want this person or this topic to be wrapped up with. Sometimes even though I have the preparation, I I divert. And I have my screenplay. Usually it's a Google Doc, so it's kind of like on my phone, so you can see me during the podcast. Sometimes my eyes are going down, and it's not that because I'm not listening to the person. I'm just looking at, all right, where do I want to lead this conversation? Okay, it's interesting what she's saying. I can ask her 7 questions, but I have to think about all the other questions I want to ask, and how do I connect this so at the end of the day, the people who are listening, they get the most value.
Sounds like a pretty good mix of having that clear structure, the framework, the systems beforehand, and then a nice flow. As you said, you don't always know what's about to happen. And you've had some amazing guests on the show. I mean, you said that it took a while for you to get Guy Kawasaki, the former Apple evangelist. You also had David Allen, also had him on my podcast, the author of Getting Things Done. Kate Williams, the CEO of 1% for the Planet. I mean, there's a lot of different people that you've had, and maybe it would be a good moment to share some of the highlights that you had with some of the guests and some of the learnings and lessons.
Oh, thank you so much, Katie. And yes, I'm grateful to having you as well as a guest. I just want to once again remind everybody who's listening and who's with us live. If you've been following the podcast for a while, we really want to hear from you. What was the episode that really resonated with you? Which podcast guest inspired you? Uh, think about somebody that maybe you listened to an episode, you heard something that you really needed to hear. It would be great to hear in the comments. And by the way, we're gonna do some giveaways. So everybody who comments and lets us know what's your favorite episode or what is a podcast guest that really resonated with you, we're gonna do some giveaways and give some gifts. So let us know in the comments. With that in mind, there have been a bunch of, I mean, 200 more people because we actually did a few panel episodes. So there's actually more than 200 people. I don't know even where to start, but I prepared, Katie, a few of the highlight videos, and I think it'll be fun to just play some of the videos, discuss them with you, and then chat a little bit about this kind of guests. Some of the guests that really inspired me. So bear with me, everybody. We started with the first guest. I was really surprised this person said yes to come on the podcast. At the time, I haven't had so many episodes, and I just cold called the person on LinkedIn, and the person's name is Joe Foster, who's the founder of Reebok. Just to give you an idea, Reebok, the sneakers company, the sports company, back in the 80s, Reebok reached number one sports brand in the world. So like having this legend on the podcast, I just called calling him on LinkedIn, and he said, "Yes, Stoyan, great. Talk to Julie, my wife. She's my manager, and we can set up a recording." I'm like, "Did he really say that?" So let me play a video with Joe Foster.
You've got to be ready for the long run. I think now people, in fact, when they start out in business, they always look for what is the end game, for how they can finish it, how they can get out. But that seems to be part of a business. I think when Jeff and I started the business, is how do we make the company successful? Not how do we get out? What are our ambitions? And they were never to be the number one sports brand. But we did get to the number one sports brand. But that was never our initial ambition. I think initially it was, how do we make a living? How can we sort of do better than our parents? And then you gain a little bit sort of experience, and you think, oh, we can go better. And so gradually you get the feel and you get the confidence that yes, we can take this further. Yes, we must take it further.
And for those of you listening who haven't listened to the episode, this guy is a legend. He wrote a book about his journey. Highly recommending it. Shoemaker is the name of the book. In the episode, he shared so many strategies and mindsets that he acquired during his journey as an entrepreneur. Just to give you an idea, it took 21 years for him and his brother to finally scale and make the company globally successful. 6 failed attempts to make it to the American market, multiple challenges and difficulties. His dad was not talking to him for 3 years, because when they actually started a company that's competitor of his father. His father, they were working for their father, but their father was not willing to innovate and try new things, and the companies was going slowly but consistently going down. So Joe was this ambitious young guy that really wanted to make it in the shoe business. So one day he goes to his father. He says, "Dad, me and my brother, we're starting a company. We're gonna produce shoes." And their dad looked at him and said, "Here's a knife. Why don't you stab me now? Why wait?" Three years they didn't speak to each other. Like all those kind of stories. So that's what I'm always kind of super interested in. The stories, the learnings. And another thing that stuck with me from the episode with Joe Foster, he said, "Don't listen to too much advice. Don't listen to anybody. Don't listen to me even. Believe in yourself. Believe in yourself. And if you've got the passion, you'll get there." I think I'm quoting him directly. I mean, there's so much advice, there's so much great information that is being shared on the podcast. We should get inspired, but at the end of the day, nobody knows better than you what you should do, what decision you should make. So that really stuck with me. So that's one example. We have here.
Amazing, amazing, Stoyan. That gave me goosebumps. And I love also the clip that you shared about going, for the long run and not just being focused on short goals. And yeah, so many memorable examples that you just shared. So what's another example that you want to share with us?
Right, I have a few of them. Let me just give some spotlight. Emilia is joining us here. From Macedonia, I think. Yes. And she's saying, "Amazing journey. Congrats. Thank you so much." Then we have Anna. She's back. She liked the episode with Matthew. Matthew Shavira, the CEO of Profits of AI. Matthew, if you're listening, brother, that was a great episode. This guy has such an amazing energy. So, hey, amazing episode. Nicoletta liked Guy Kawasaki. Why don't we play a clip from Guy Kawasaki? Let's do that. So, Guy Kawasaki was another kind of example of having a celebrity on the podcast, and for the nth time understanding that people are just people, and people have their habits, and people have their flaws, they have their brilliance as well, but people are people, and he's a very genuine personality. So here's a video that is a highlight from the episode. By the way, he shared a lot of very behind the scenes stories, many behind the scenes stories, and this is one of the behind the scenes stories that Kai Kawasaki shared. You share this little story that there was a time by the end of the campaign. I remember, as I remember, that you confronted Steve Jobs. Can you share the story? And
Yeah. So
was it worth it? Was it worth it to confront Steve?
so the first time the marketing staff of Apple saw the Think Different campaign, Lee Clow from Day brought in a video. It showed us, various spots. And I think there were about 10 people in the room with me and Steve Jobs. And Lee Clow showed us the ads, and we absolutely loved the ads. And at the end, Lee Clow says to Steve, I have 2 copies of these videos. I'm going to give one to you and one to Guy. And Steve told Lee, don't give one to Guy. So at that point, I said, Steve, what's the matter? Don't you trust me? And Steve said, yeah, Guy, I don't trust you. And then I came right back and I said, that's okay, Steve, because I don't trust you either. That probably cost me $200 million, but it was worth it.
So what's that about? Why didn't he trust Steve? That's the question, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think he was sticking to his values, and he felt that he's not treated and appreciated and not treated correctly, so he confronted Steve Jobs that way, and then he lost some stock options that he was supposed to get, and that stock options, if you look at the value today, it's probably 200 million. But he seems to own it, and think it's, I don't know. That's quite some amount though, but interesting.
Amazing. Do you want to share another small snippet?
Yeah, and again, everybody who's listening to us, this is we're celebrating 200 episodes of Productivity Master. Celebrate you guys, the listeners. You're the most important part of this podcast. We just so grateful every time we receive a comment or like a message. This podcast really inspired us. So please let us know if you're watching the podcast. What is an episode that really inspired you? What is a moment that really inspired you? We'll keep playing some of those highlight videos, talk about the key learnings, and just chat about it with Katie. The next one, and I don't have a plan, by the way, now. I'm just going around with the flow. But the next one, I had the chance to meet this super inspiring lady, Heather Mills. Heather Mills, she's also a celebrity. She's the former wife of Paul McCartney. But beyond that, she's one of the toughest ladies I've ever seen. So she lost her leg when she was in the 90s. I think she was 23 and 24. Motorcycle accident. Crossing the road, the motorcycle goes through her basically, and she lost her leg. She had to be amputated. And while she was in the hospital, she tried different diets because she didn't want her leg to get infected. And vegan diet helped her to get well, to get better. So she gets amputated, and she has this mindset: I want to show the world. I want to show the world that you can do anything. You have no limitations. That lady goes off and does the craziest things. So she wins skating competitions. She starts the biggest philanthropies. She has currently the biggest vegan plant, like for vegan facilities in the world. She did. She had 5 world records for skiing with an amputated leg. She was the first person to successfully perform a ski jump, and she has a world record for. She's still the fastest disabled woman alive. I think she managed with skis. She managed to accelerate to 160 something kilometers per hour. Like the ladies is. I mean, this episode. Just listen. If you're looking for inspiration, if you're feeling down, just listen to this episode. She actually created the world record, Guinness record, I think, for the ski jump with a 3 times bigger leg. Because the day before the camera came and the people who were assessing her, she managed to break the leg, the amputated leg, during one of the training sessions. Now she doesn't have a leg and she's in Austria. So she goes online and she starts writing on forums, and anybody has a spare leg, I need to I need to jump. And then an Austria ski trainer is like, I can borrow you my leg. So okay, how big it is? So she realized 3 times bigger than hers. Like, you know what? I committed. I'll do it. So she does this world record with 3 times bigger leg. But I'm gonna play a video actually where she talks about every time she's in a bad mental state, how she gets out of it.
I think people focus so much. So I just always try and not focus on myself. I think people focus so much on themselves that they can go into like a spiral. Whereas if you actually, when something horrible happens to you, the best way of healing is to immediately do something for somebody else in that situation and try and find problem solving, because it's not only cathartic, it's also inspiring, being around other people that you can work with and help and make a difference. So I think people spend too much time thinking instead of doing.
What do you think, Katie?
Yeah, I really like that. I think it's true that when we're in a negative spiral, we end up focusing too much on ourselves. And if you can get out of your own world, and like she said, doing is good. So you're doing something for someone else, but also it just takes the focus a bit away from your own problems. And I think then you can think more clearly. So very nice.
Definitely. I have another one. I'll try to find the video. And this person is actually, um, uh, when you have in every relationship, you kind of know how much you give and how much you take. It sounds a little bit bad, but usually a great friendship is somewhere in the middle, right? Like there's no, it's not transactional. Um, you want to give and you want, you know, your friends to support you when it's not about transaction, right? But I gotta say, this person here, if I find the video only, it's been so. I'm trying to help this person, to give to this person, and I'm telling you, I just need to. I'll do it just now. I, I'm always on the, like, I can't even believe that people from such scale is so nice and so kind and so helpful. And this person is, I'll play just now. This person is Howard Bihar. The gentleman is being number 2 in Starbucks, former president of Starbucks. Imagine joining Starbucks when the company has 30 shops selling coffee beans. They were not even having coffee shops. It was just these small shops selling beans of coffee. He joins the company when there were 30 shops, and with his help, he was the guy who pushed the agenda of scaling the company internationally. So he was the founding president of Starbucks International, and bringing the company to, at the time he retired, 15,000 coffee shops and the most recognized coffee brand in the world. I don't know if people understand the scale of what this guy did. He was number 2 after Howard Schultz. And he was also his mentor in a way, because he was a little bit older than him. So he was his mentor, but they had this interesting relationship. Now, just to give you an idea, Howard immediately said yes to the podcast, came to the podcast. He was prepared. He gave it his best. At some point at the podcast, Katie, he says, here is my phone number. Here's my email. If anybody needs help, get in touch. I might not reply tomorrow. I get a lot of emails and reach out, but I'll get back to you. And I want to help. If I can be helpful, I don't understand everything, but I know a couple of things about business. So if I can be of help, reach out to me. I'd love to help. His thing is about servant leadership. And he believes if we as leaders think more about the people that we lead than about ourselves and our profits, at the end of the day, the profits will actually come back at us. But let me play you the video.
You either live your values or you don't, right? Everybody says, well, it's either or. Either you can live your values or you can make money. That's just an excuse. That's a fallacy. That's not real. You can live your values and make money. And that's what we tried to do. I mean, we needed to make a profit. You know, if we were going to carry on with this great experiment called Starbucks, we had to make an adequate profit. But we didn't have to do it on the backs of our people. We had to do it with our people. And that's what we tried to do. Were we perfect? No, we were not perfect. We made mistakes, but we always had a self-correcting mechanism. And that mechanism always brought us back to our values and how we wanted to act. And so I reject that idea that you can't make money and treat people well and live by your values. I think it's the opposite. I think if you don't treat people well and live by your values, you're not going to make money. You may make it in the short term, but you're not going to make it in the long term.
What do you think, Katie?
Yes, I think it's the only way to grow your business and to be fulfilled is to have it in alignment with your values. I mean, for me, it just sounds totally obvious, but I can imagine that a lot of companies don't necessarily think that way.
And you work with many companies. I work with many organizations. If we have to be honest, we shouldn't have a job in that area. It should be by default, but we do, and we need to be there more and more. Unfortunately, because companies are more interested in results and the monetary side, but not only any kind of results. And hopefully, with this type of podcast, with my podcast, with your podcast, with the work that we do, we can inspire more people for this kind of revolution that's more about what if we start putting people first, not still caring about the productivity. This podcast is called Productivity Mastery, still caring about the productivity and results, but also the second pillar to be caring for the people. Because when you care for the people properly, and by the way, care doesn't mean just being fluffy and soft. Caring means providing feedback, keeping people accountable, not letting them get away, like all those kind of things. Like it's part of the journey. But if we care for the people, of course we're going to get more results. So people like Howard, I mean, I don't know what to say, just incredible individuals. I reached out to him and asked him, Howard, how would you feel about writing a foreword for my book? Yes, Stoyan, of course. Let me know what you want me to focus on. I'd love to. When is the deadline? When is the deadline? It's like this guy. I mean, this guy was number 2 in Starbucks. And when you see those people, and by the way, Katie, this is one of my learnings. The higher to the top I get to meet people, like the president of Starbucks. I'll play another video now. The Hollywood cinematographers, like people who are very high up that achieved a lot. They're some of the nicest people usually. Not all of them, but they're some of the nicest and most humble people. Sometimes they don't have the time because everybody wants their time and attention, but they're very nice. They're very humble, and hopefully we can inspire the audience, but two of us as well. Like if we can be these kind of people one day, right? Like that's just we can create structures where we can give back in a scaled way. Oh my God, it's amazing. So another person I already mentioned him, but this is a guy I met. How can I say, in a very strange way? Universe is bringing you things in a surprising way. I was working as a video and movie producer, so my colleagues went to Los Angeles. They ended up bumping onto this guy in a bar. So they get his contacts and his wife's contacts. They get in touch afterwards, and apparently they had a good conversation at the bar. So we ended up selling this guy. He's a Hollywood cinematographer or director of photography, responsible for. He was the guy in charge of the camera department on movies like Terminator Salvation, Need for Speed. He did some Game of Thrones. Like the guy is a legend. His name is Shane Herbert. So my boss and my colleague at the time, they got Shane Herbert to collaborate on a commercial for a client. Then I got in touch. I helped them a little bit with certain things. offered my help. Then we kept in touch, and again, the guy's so busy working with all these big Hollywood productions, but he managed to secure 1 hour where he can come to the podcast and share some productivity lessons from his experience as a filmmaker, which I highly recommend you guys listen to this podcast. It's, even if you're not in the creative industry, you're not a filmmaker, I feel so much inspiration could come from other directions and you can apply it in your own life. This is a video that I picked for this episode today, a highlight from the episode with Shane Herbert.
There's so many people that have a creative expression in the movie. And so your job, your most difficult job as a director and as a director of photography, is communicating the vision. Because you have so many creatives and you got to get everyone making one movie instead of everyone making their own movies. And that's what I have, finally mastered, is being able to come up with communication styles and documents that do not put people in silos, but bring people together and work on one united document that then educates every single department.
I've been using this metaphor so many times. You got to get people to make one movie instead of making their own movies. I mean, think about a corporate or a team, a business. Is the marketing and sales and operations, are they making the same movie? Or is everybody focused on their own thing? So this type of metaphors also really kind of resonate with me. Once again, I wanna invite everybody who's here with us. Let us know where you guys are listening from, and if you've previously came across Productivity Mastery. If not, of course, go to Spotify, go to Apple Podcasts, subscribe to the podcast. 200 episodes already. But if you've already been following, what is a story from an episode that's really stuck with you? Let us know in the comments for the chance to win some prizes. Katie, back at you. I don't want to take your host, right?
So many amazing snippets. It was wonderful to get all these lessons, and it gives you a brief idea of the sort of golden nuggets that you can find within your podcast. I'm curious to know, what was the most surprising thing that maybe you learned from your guests? I mean, you mentioned some great examples here in storytelling, but what was one thing that really stuck with you now 200 episodes in that comes to your mind?
This summer I interviewed Guy Kawasaki. I just mentioned that, and a couple of weeks ago I was at a conference and somebody was talking about creativity, and they were saying, yeah, you're a Guy Kawasaki. Like he's like a metaphor for innovation, creativity, like for many people, like best of the best, right? The famous guy. So since the podcast is called Productivity Mastery, I asked Guy Kawasaki, what do you do? How do you make sure you stay sharp? You stay at the top of your game? How do you start your day? And then again, he was really honest and upfront, and he was like, man, people think I'm this perfect guy that just, wakes up in the morning, starts like with meditation and then writing for 5 hours, like nonstop with no distractions. No, man. He said I'm waking up 4 a.m. because I'm old. and then for an hour and a half, I'm just scrolling through my Instagram and my social media, trying to fall asleep again. If I'm lucky, I do. I sleep a couple more hours, wake up, I have a breakfast, I scroll through my social a little bit more. Then I procrastinate, I go to the beach, I surf for a couple of hours. Maybe I do an hour and 2 of writing. I come back, I do, it's like, I think the realization that many of the people that you put on a pedestal, like that, oh my God, this person should be perfect. They're not. They're brilliant in a specific area, but I don't know if that was a surprise, because having conversations with so many people, that people are not necessarily productive, or in the way that you imagine productive. Because again, he wrote 16 books. He was chief evangelist of Apple. He's done some stuff, right? He's been he has a pretty high speaking fee. I'm not going to share it, but it's in the six figures. So I mean, the guy's doing stuff, right? So you don't expect that he's just a regular guy in the way he conducts his habits. So that was kind of a interesting story. That first one that comes to mind.
Interesting. That must have been a shock compared to your image of productivity. I'm also curious to know if he changed, maybe if he was like uber productive and then after a while thought, okay, he could chill and surf, or
I
if
think
that was
could be
the
though.
process the whole
I
time.
think it could be. It could be. And by the way, on the topic of putting these famous or super successful people in a little bit high up, I just want to play another video, which is um, we had the chance, and I want to give credit again to Nicoletta from my team for securing this amazing guest. We had the opportunity to interview the former vice president of Microsoft. He was reporting directly to Bill Gates, working door to door with Steve Ballmer. And we talk a little bit about imposter syndrome, and here's what he said.
That I tell younger people, and they laugh at me, is that there is imposter syndrome in the C-suite. There's imposter syndrome at every single level. They are just human beings. They question whether or not they're good enough to be doing what they're doing. Yeah, I can guarantee you that I had conversations with Bill Gates that were, I am overwhelmed with how am I going to deal with these people, right? Those conversations happen at every single level. Am I doing the right thing? Is this the right way? Right? They are people too. And so expecting them to be magical gurus of fonts of wisdom all the time is unrealistic and unfair to them. They are doing a hard job. It's the same job you're doing. It's just at a bigger scale. And recognizing that job is the same all the way up humanizes that job. I get so frustrated on social media when I will post something about some senior level and I get these comments that are like, all management is evil, right? Well, all management has a family and goes home and whatever. They're trying their best too. And to be honest, they probably don't feel like they're doing a very good job, just like some days you don't either, right? Everybody's just doing their best. And as soon as you try and understand what they're doing, you can understand it a little better.
That was a good reminder to me, because so often we're looking at the top and we're judging them. Oh, the boss this. Oh, because of like you always focus on the negative. But if you go higher up in the hierarchy, you got to understand, the higher up you go, the harder it is. The more decisions you got to make, the more people you're responsible for. It comes with more power, more decision making, but it also comes with the price. And sometimes we need to be a little bit more empathetic to understand. If you work for a startup, understand what the founder is going through. Put yourself in the shoes of the other person. How do you generate value as an employee? How can you make the life of your manager, of your boss, better? Maybe you're the first one that needs to start this process, and because the more you do it, the better it's going to be for everybody. That's we have another comment from Mana. Imposter syndrome is such an amazing topic. Stoyan, you're such an exceptional and easygoing person. But I'm curious, did you ever face imposter syndrome when you were starting? If so, how did you work through it and overcome those feelings? Should I go for it, Katie?
I'm also thinking not just when you started, but throughout, because imposter syndrome can be when you begin. But I'm also curious, if you've had it recently too.
Oh, yeah. All the time. I can start with the starting. I mean, first of all, Anna see me a couple of weeks ago at the Web Summit. She was kind enough to join my stage, and I was emceeing a stage, and I did a opening speech at the Growth Summit stage, and she was there, and she gave me some very positive feedback. I'm grateful for that. But I wish she saw me like 10 years ago, because I was one of the worst speakers ever. I couldn't go on a stage and and say a couple words. Like I would freeze. I was so nervous. I wanted things to be perfect. So I've been dealing with imposter syndrome all my life. And I would say the more you do something, the more confident you become. But you get these moments that you're like, you know, the back of the voice of your head is like, what am I doing on this stage? You know, the some of the speakers of Web Summit over the years was, you know, the Vladimir Klitschko, the, you know, celebrities. Pharrell was there this year, the Pharrell Williams, the musician. Like, it's like, what am I doing there? Why did you invite me? like, so you're thinking about that, right? But I think you gotta catch yourself, and you gotta say, hey, man, get yourself together. You know, your story is interesting. You have a lot of energy. You're like, you've done this and that. You have a lot of value to share. And I think the biggest game changer for me in my journey as a speaker, as a consultant, was when I realized it's not about me when I get on stage. Katie, you probably know my story. One of my coaching clients challenged me to do my first speech because I was resisting and coming up with excuses for 18, if not more, months. I didn't want to go. I was telling everybody how I'm going to have this speech and this workshop and it's going to be amazing. And I'll never do it because, first of all, I was busy, but I wasn't the real reason. I didn't believe I was good enough yet. And I would postpone it. So one of my coaching clients pushed me to do my first workshop, my first speech, gave me 30 days, said if I don't deliver, I need to pay £500 to an organization, charity that I hate the cause of, like extreme feminists that hate men. Like, you need to donate to them, and you need to publicly post that, you know, you support this organization, something like that. I mean, he just wanted to you know, to just to get me to do it, right? So I made an event on Facebook back in 2016, I think. Did an event, invited a lot of people. At the day of the event, I'm nervous. I've trained in front of the mirror, in front of my neighbors. I'm nervous. It's like, it was an interesting day. And I was always thinking about myself. How would I perform? What would people think about me? And then, of course, I did the workshop. I prepared. I get people to talk. People had a good time, you know. And I'm like, oh, whew, made it, you know, check. But then this lady from China comes to me. She signed up for the workshop, found it somewhere online, and she told me her story and how she grew up in this town in China where, you know, men would make the decisions and women were repressed, and they are not allowed to make a decision. She was 25. She said, I never made a decision for myself. When I need to decide, I call my mom, I call my dad. They tell me what to do. Even for this event, I was like, Mom, should I go? And once I get married, my husband will decide for me. It's my culture. But now I came to this event and you asked me to close my eyes and see my vision and my future. And I saw myself clearly. I want to be a storyteller. I want to empower other women in China to be their own leaders from this region. And she says, thank you, Katie. And she hugs me. And she just holds on to me, you know. And I'm just staying and I'm looking at everybody. I'm looking at her, mixed emotions. Like, what do I do? And it just got to me. It's not about me. I didn't go out for 18 months because I was thinking, what do people think about me? And the reality is, maybe in this conversation here, Katie, with you, maybe you'll say something that will touch somebody. It's not going to be perfect, but maybe that's what we need to focus on, the other side. And the more you do that, the less nervous you get. To the question of Anna, do I struggle with imposter syndrome? I still do. I think a lot less than before. And again, with experience, confidence grows and imposter syndrome is smaller, but it's always there.
Yeah, that's a big part of the journey, and such a beautiful illustration of why it's so much more about focusing on other people, which is also something we saw in one of your recent snippets. And the second we put ourselves a bit in the background, then we have less anxiety and less stress, and we're able to do a better job, but also help other people. And I'm curious, how has the podcast then influenced your own growth, but maybe also your productivity? To come back to the productivity topic and leadership style, how has the podcast supported you with this?
I would recommend everybody who likes to do this kind of stuff to consider starting a show, starting a podcast, starting a channel. To me, the podcast is one of the biggest learning experiences. I started 2020 to be the host of the podcast. And when I look at our first episode, because I was I was watching the first episode, Katie, you and me did back in 2020, I'm like, oh my God, I can't watch myself, right? Like you're just looking like, oh my God, I hope nobody ever watches this. So I went out on LinkedIn, I posted the video so people can see it. But it's like hosting a podcast is one of the best things you can do to become a better communicator, because it forces you to ask better questions. It forces you to become better in your presence, your voice, making pauses, and maybe most importantly, listening actively. So it's been a game changer for me. A lot of it is indirect. Like every week, I'm having a conversation with somebody extremely smart, picking up their brain. So, of course, I'm picking up some strategies, ideas that I apply into my business, into my speaking business. Um, I I do share a lot of those examples, of course, these highlights, like we did today. If I want to make a point somewhere, I'll give credit to the person. I'll, you know, speak at a conference. By the way, the founder of Freebook also thinks so. Go check out his book, right? So it's a win-win. But so that helps me to have interesting stories, examples, insights as a speaker, and keeps me sharp. You got to sharpen the axe. That's what they say in productivity, right? Was it Stephen Covey? Sharpen the
Stephen
axe.
Covey, habit 7. Yeah, habit 7, sharpen the axe.
Yeah, you got to stay sharp. You got to stay sharp. And this cliche thing, you're the average of the five people. Now I'm a mathematician. I don't believe it's the average of the five people. Maybe it's 6.73. Like, why is it five? Right? That's my mind. Like, but I do believe it has a huge impact. In our first book, Katie, Perform: The Unsexy Truth About Startup Success, we are featuring this couple of studies they did on if your friend, if you have a friend that's smoking, you are 42% more likely to smoke. If you have a friend of a friend who smokes, you're whatever 32%. Like, I don't know the percentages, but they've done this study multiple times for different kind of disciplines like smoking, happiness, and so on and so forth. And the data is there. You are the average of the people that you surround yourself and spend more time with. So if you don't have this network in your city or at your workplace, you can listen to a podcast. You can listen to Productivity Mastery. You can listen to Katie's podcast. You can start a podcast and have these interviews with these smart people. So you have an excuse to expand your mind and learn something new. So part of the reason I do it is, again, it's for me. I just want to keep sharpening the axe. I want to keep getting better. If I want to be one of the best speakers in the world, then I gotta keep improving. I can't stay in the same level.
I resonate so much with what you're saying about the environment and the peer group. And I realized also myself, when I read certain books or listen to certain podcasts or interview people on my podcast, it really does sharpen the way you think and helps you to think on a whole other level. If you listen to people who are struggling to build a 8, 9, 10 figure business, suddenly building a 6 or 7 figure business feels a lot easier. So it helps you to think a different level. I call this like sky roof vibrations. So like rooftop vibrations, and it gets you on this rooftop vibration when you with these types of guests. So moving forward, Stoyan, what's next with Productivity Mastery? I mean, 200 episodes now. This is huge. What's your vision for the future of the podcast?
Well, that's a great question, Katie. I think that the long-term vision is yet to be decided in the next 1 2 months, where me and my team, come together and we kind of put the focus. Where do we want to be? What are the kind of guests? Do we want to change the format? So I can't really give you anything as of now as the kind of bigger strategic vision, but what we want to keep doing is we want to keep improving. We want to keep bringing the most amazing people on the podcast, and to make it as easy as possible for the our listeners, the audience, to be part of the whole experience, you know by engaging, doing Q&A sessions. We often do mastermind calls. You've been part of some of those mastermind calls, private mastermind calls. We invite some of our listeners and our guests, so we get people to engage and connect. I would imagine sometime in the future we might do a physical event, like a retreat or a networking session or something. Bring everybody to one location, listeners and guests, and have everybody to help each other. So I would say that probably the direction we might be growing into, I want to say a big word, but might be the community side. And this is the reason, everybody listening, we want to hear from you. What do you want us to focus on? And what are some guests that you, for example, want to see on the podcast? What do you like when you're listening to a podcast? So we can maybe think about it. And again, let us know in the comments, if you're listening to us live, or if you're listening on the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcast. Who's somebody you want to see on the podcast? Could be anybody in the world, an author, a celebrity, a great founder from your city. I don't know. Who's somebody that you really want to see on the podcast? Let us know, and we'll see if we can reach out to them.
That's the same question for you, Stoyan. Who's on your dream guest list for your next 100 episodes?
Well, let me reflect a little bit on that one, because I've been reaching out to so many people in the past couple of years, and some of them, of course, never replied. Some of them said no. Who was somebody I was recently looking to get on the podcast? We haven't reached out yet, though. I wanted to see the former CEO of Pepsi. That was somebody I was looking at. I think Tim Ferriss would be a fantastic person to get on the podcast. I know he's not doing so much podcasting these days, and it might be a little bit difficult to get somebody like him. We tried to get Greg McKeown, the author of Essentialism. So far, unsuccessful, but I'm sure we're gonna keep trying. Some other people. Let me just think. I wanted to get the founder of Spotify as well, Daniel Ek. Daniel, if you're listening, you're welcome. So just reach out to us.
Yeah, and he's based in Stockholm. He could be on both of our shows.
There you go, Katie. There you go. I mean, you're there physically, so hey, go there. All right, you have here a suggestion. All right, Anna, Monica, we'll check her out for sure. Monica, I hope I pronounce it well. Bielskite. Is that how you pronounce it, Katie? Hopefully.
Yeah, just get there. Yeah.
Yeah, Daniel Ek could be interesting. I don't know. There's many of those. Sometimes it's a personality as well. On the one side is this super credible and incredible people that you want to have on the show because they bring you publicity. They have a lot of stories to share. They want to learn and pick their mindset. Sometimes there's this outstanding people that they're not at a celebrity status yet, but they have so much to share. And sometimes, Katie, you and me, we're not at a celebrity list. We're hopefully gonna get at some point at the there. We are like a little bit down on our career journey, right? But listening to you, for example, listening to Matthew, maybe because we are not celebrities yet, we need to work 10 times harder and the level of insights that are structured and stories, like there could be so much more. Um, Another great person we got on the podcast, Winston Clemens. Winston is this incredible individual. When it comes to mindset, it's one of the people that comes to mind. He he was born with this rare brittle bone disorder. So he's this small guy in a wheelchair. He broke 150 bones since the time he was 12 years old. This condition he has is really been difficult for him. But if you talk to the guy, this is one of the most abundant people you'll see. He owns it. He's a very successful businessman. He has a wife with a kid. He's smashing it on stage. He's always this positive, uplifting personality. Winston, if you're watching, brother, I love you. And those kind of people. These are people that inspire me, and we want to get more of these people. And I would say genuine people. Genuine people. We had some people that reach out to us that they're just not at the same page. They share different type of values and principles, and they want something, and they're like, we like to connect with caring and nice people.
Fantastic. And how can the listeners continue to grow with you and the podcast as you continue this journey?
I mean, first of all, if you guys have never seen any other episode of Productivity Master, we will appreciate if you subscribe to the podcast. It's available everywhere. It's free, so you can find it on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, any other major platform. And if you decide to rate it, give us 5 stars. That helps a lot, because the more of those subscriptions and 5 stars we get, the bigger the audience, the bigger our power when we are securing high profile guests. So the more you can do that, the more we'll be bringing you even better and greater, more credible people. So that's one. You can listen to the podcast there. We're very approachable. Me, Nicoletta, the people behind the podcast. So get in touch. If you enjoyed an episode, make sure to send us a message on LinkedIn, or under the podcast. If it's on LinkedIn, on YouTube, just drop us a comment, drop us a message. If you have an idea for collaboration, get in touch. We are super open, and we want to see how we can engage you. And the more you interact with us, the more you get a chance to get invited to private mastermind calls with the guests, and receive some of these invitations. So I mean, let us know how we can improve. If there is any specific format, or you want more Q&A, like, I don't know, like we open to hear. We want to grow with you. We want to know what you want to grow for, and if we can introduce you to some people, we're happy with that. So just be friendly, get in touch, even if you haven't met us before. just say hello.
Amazing. What's the last message that you want to leave the audience with before we close this 200th episode?
Episode 200. How did we even get here, right? I want to say thank you to, number one, you guys, the listeners. Thank you so much for being with us. Thank you for listening to the episodes, sharing with people, sharing on LinkedIn when you like a little highlight or episode. Really means a lot. It helps us to grow. Thank you for subscribing, giving us stars, for just being with us and supporting us. It's been not an easy journey. Building the podcast, keeping the profile of the guest to that level, it requires a lot of resources. So thanks for supporting us and motivating us. Number one, the listeners. This is why we're doing it. Number two, our team. I want to give thank you to, first of all, Nicoletta. Katie, Nicoletta. Nico is, if I'm the front of the podcast, she's the back. So she's the one that's running the podcast. Nicoletta Prvo. She's Nico. I guess you're here listening. Thank you so much for everything you're doing in the background, running everything, managing everything. I want to say also thank you to Anya Bolton, the person that was in the first couple of years doing this job for helping me launch the podcast, helping me grow it. Everybody else part of the team, the content team. And last but not least, I want to say thank you to the incredible people who, like you, Katie, the guests of the podcast, who are willingly joining, sharing good energy, sharing amazing insights, and supporting the podcast in any shape or form. Specifically, you, Katie, I'm sending you a big heart. I'm super grateful for having you as a as a friend, as a fellow productivity master and host, and for hosting for the first time ever, hosting an episode somebody other than me. So and you did a brilliant job as usual. And I just want to say, everybody, if you guys enjoy productivity mastery, you should also go check out Katie's podcast. Still called the Focus B.
Focus B Show, yeah.
The Focus B Show, guys. So yeah, let us know, guys. Let us know in the comments if you enjoyed specifically any episode from before. If there's any guest that you want us to invite or anything else. I'm super grateful for this milestone, 200 episodes. We're not stopping. We're just gonna speed up. We have a bunch of great guests that Nico has been has been booking for December and January. I will keep the surprise, but there's a few incredible people. We have a unicorn founder. We have a how can I say, a rally racer, a driver, one of the best in her area. She's a lady, and I mean, we have a bunch of incredible guests, so we'll keep bringing you people so we can continue getting better with our productivity, our leadership, our performance. We'll talk about workplace culture and all kind of topics around that. So yeah, I mean, what can I say? It's Friday for us here live, listening to the podcast. I'm grateful for everybody joining us live, celebrating this moment, this milestone. And I wanna invite you guys to continue empowering yourself, continue growing, and if we can be a help to you anyhow, let us know.
It's been amazing, Stoyan. Such a joy, such an honor to host this 200 episode with you, to hear all the highlights of your guests, your journeys, your lessons along the way. It's been wonderful to be here with you, Stoyan. I'm so excited, and I can't believe that we started the podcast together. I was the first guest on the podcast, and now I get to interview you for episode 200. It's been amazing. And I highly invite everyone listening to, like you said, continue following the podcast, engage, get in touch with Stoyan. You can see he's approachable, he's friendly. That's how we first met. I sent Stoyan a DM on LinkedIn. So be in touch and send some ideas around the
And
podcast.
by the
We
way,
want
if you're curious to see me and Katie, our beautiful faces from the first ever episode, I just posted on LinkedIn a few days ago. You can find the video on my LinkedIn, posts, like me and Katie, first episode, looking a little bit strange. It was
and
beautiful.
you were also on my podcast on Focus B Show. You can also find it. So
Yeah,
there,
we have an episode there as well.
yeah.
So, but
Amazing.
that's the thing. That's the final message, guys. You just have to start. You don't have to be ready. Go find the video from our first episode. It's horrible. It looks horrible. There's no microphones. Like, I mean, we have a lot to learn. Don't get me wrong. But if you compare the first to the episode 200, you see what I mean. Maybe there's something right now that you're like postponing for a while, and you haven't done it because you don't think you're ready. But maybe now is the time. Maybe you had to listen to this live session or this podcast. Maybe it's time to grab your life in your hands and just make this first step.
Beautiful. Thank you, Stoyan, for sharing all this joy and magic for episode 200. Thank you for everyone for listening and tuning in. Wonderful to share this journey with all of you.
Thanks, guys, so much. And see you once again at episode 201. Keep performing.